Well, it has not been the Pac-12's year, that's for sure. Amongst continuing uncertainty over the Pac-12 media deal, which continues to have potential streaming partners in the mix, the Colorado Buffaloes have decided to bolt the herd and head towards the familiar pastures of the Big 12. This is major breaking news coming out today, this being Wednesday. More expected to come out Thursday, but Brett McMurphy was the first to break the news, tweeting, Colorado leaving Pac-12 to return to the Big 12 in 2024. Sources told Action News headquarters, CU will receive full Big 12 share, $31.7 million from ESPN/Fox media deal. Buffs left because of Big 12 stability and Pac-12's uncertainty. Sources said announcement coming Thursday, which is probably when most of you are watching this video. So the big question here is what's next? What's next for the Pac-12? How does this impact the Mountain West? We're going to discuss both of those. We're going to talk through two possible scenarios and a couple of different options within scenario one, and then we'll break down just what is going to happen here moving forward for the Pac-12 and the Mountain West. So first off, what's next? Well, there's speculation abounding about who is going to be the next bolt after Colorado. This is not expected to be the last domino to fall. Washington, there's tweets coming out there about Washington potentially being on the move, though nothing official. Speculation about the other four corner schools being interested, which has been going on for some time. Nothing new as of right now coming out about those schools, but Arizona State, Utah potentially in the mix. But what is more clear in these murky times is that Oregon's Board of Trustees is meeting tomorrow at 10 a.m. Seems to be kind of a last-minute setup to discuss the future of Oregon. Now, Oregon and Washington, both those programs pre-vetted here by the Big Ten. Could those teams potentially be making a move towards leaving the Pac-12? You know, Pac-12 is down to 9 members now. Who are they going to add? San Diego State is probably the next team up. Do they replace Colorado as far as a Power 5 member status goes? You know, as far as media market, I think they do better than Colorado. As far as the playing status, they do better than Colorado. But is it enough? This might be the final block. And it looks like, you know, with this meeting tomorrow with Oregon, that Oregon will potentially be leaving. Now, here we're going to talk through scenario one. If Oregon does indeed decide to leave the conference, almost certainly for the Big Ten. I don't think they're in the mix here for the Big 12. But if Oregon decides to leave the conference, what happens here in scenario one? Now, we'll also talk about what happens if Oregon decides to stay. That's what we'll talk about at the end of the video. But in here, scenario one, what happens if Oregon decides to leave? Well, almost certainly Washington will follow them. And they're not going to go to the Big Ten without Washington coming with them. You need that travel partner right there. And besides, it's an uneven number of teams. So the Big Ten is going to want to add 2 teams. So if Oregon does indeed leave, gets that invite to be able to move over to the Big Ten and takes Washington with them, I think that definitely the other 3 of the 4 corner schools would leave. So Utah, Arizona State all leave, go to the Big 12. Big 12, assuming the Big 12 have them, there hasn't been any indications that they wouldn't. In fact, there's been strong indications that the Big 12 is pressing to try and get all 4 corner schools to come join the Big 12. It's been definitely a rallying cry among their fans. So I anticipate that if Oregon and Washington leave, following Colorado here, the rest of the 4 corner schools will go to the Big 12, put in the Big 12 at 16 teams, making them right up on the playing level. I mean, that's a strong conference, right on an even playing level with the Big 10, SEC being able to compete for that market value. So now who's left? You know, who's left here at this point is Cal, Washington State, Oregon State, and Stanford. And this, I think, is where you have a 3-part potential scenarios that could happen here. So first, we're going to call this scenario A, and this has been bounced around on some other channels, is that, you know, Cal and Stanford just drop their football programs altogether, focus instead on basketball, drop their football programs, and then Oregon State and Washington State are absorbed into the Mountain West. I don't see that as a strong possibility. I could potentially see it happening. I don't expect it to happen. I think there's so much history and legacy built up within these programs, within their football programs, that I don't see that as a possibility. Though I don't see them being added to a Power 5 conference either. So let's talk about scenario B here. Well, scenario B is that the Pac-12 absorbs the top, so they're left with 4 teams, right? They absorb the top 5 Mountain West teams plus SMU to get them back to a 10-program conference. So you'd be looking at Boise State, San Diego State, Fresno State, Colorado State, and they're not a top 5 Mountain West team by any stretch of the imagination, but because of their media market, UNLV plus SMU. UNLV has already been thrown around as a potential candidate to the Power 5 for a while. Colorado State would be given that replacement there from Colorado that is leaving. I think Boise State is a no-brainer as far as their strength of schedule. San Diego State is already on the docket, and Fresno State is also a strong contender as well. And they have a large, not necessarily immediate media market, but they have a large media market geographically there up in the central portion of California. So I think they take those 6 teams to get to 10 teams here in scenario B. But is that the most likely scenario? The Mountain West has just put their foot down with San Diego State saying, sure, you can leave, but we're not going to make it easier for you. We're not a stepping stone conference. You can leave if you want to, but you're going to pay big to get out of this league. So are the Mountain West teams willing to make that risk to do that jump to what is, at this point, is it a stronger conference? Is it a better conference? Are they willing to pay the money forward for what is no longer truly a Power 5 conference? You have the imagining the reawakening of the Big East occurrence, when all San Diego State, Boise State were ready to jump to the Big East. In fact, they'd already left the Mountain West, and then the Big East just collapsed. The West Virginia left, and what was left was no longer Power 5 conference. Boise State could have stayed with the American Athletic Conference that had reemerged. Instead, they came back along with San Diego State to the Mountain West. Do these teams want to jump to what is a shaken, unsturdy, poorly run conference that is no longer truly Power 5 status? You have 4 remaining Power 5 teams in Oregon State, Washington State, Cal, and Stanford, and then the cream of the top of the Mountain West, which is those would, I think, be better than the teams that were left remaining. But is that the right move when you're looking at the financial hit that you're going to be taking, the uncertainty that's coming ahead of you? Is that the move that takes place? The Pac-12, in this case, there are 4 teams left. They're not the strong conference. They're not the ones with the bargaining chip. I think the bargaining lies within the Mountain West. I think the Mountain West has the stronger position here. So that is scenario C, and I think probably the more likely scenario that the Mountain West actually absorbs the remaining Pac-12 teams to take them to a 16-team conference, being able to potentially claim that Power 5 slot. But remember, Power 5, Group of 5, they don't exist anymore. Those don't matter. With the new playoff format, it's not about, your top group Power 5 conferences. There's no automatic bids. It's just the top 6 conference champions plus 6 at-large bids. With those teams added, with what Mountain West currently has, which I've argued in previous videos, I think they're the strongest Group of 5 conference already, and then you add in those 4 Power 5 teams to this conference, how do you not see one of their conference champions making it into the top 6, potentially top 5 conference championship contenders in the top 25 CFP poll? I don't see that as anything that's outside the realm of possibility. I think that is the stronger move. The Mountain West is the stable conference. They add teams to add to their stability. The Pac-12 teams that are left, these 4 teams, they're not paying any exit fees, and they're being absorbed into basically what is the same, what would be created either way. So I think that's the more likely move. I think the Pac-12 teams that are left get absorbed into the Mountain West. You have Cal, Washington State, Oregon State, and Stanford join the Mountain West Conference. They become a 16-team conference. They become the dominant conference on the West Coast, the only remaining FBS conference on the West Coast. They pull in all the Power 5 money and sponsorship money that was previously going to the Pac-12 in general. They pull in definitely the top Group of 5 slot, and I think they make a strong case to be one of the top 5 conferences in the country. That, to me, is a stronger conference. You look at a 16-team Mountain West conference versus a 10-team Pac-12 conference with some Mountain West teams and maybe SMU or somebody else added in. I think the stronger conference is the 16-team conference, the super conference. That's where we're going. It's the age of super conferences. I think that is the conference that's able to make a name for themselves in the college football playoff. And I think that's where we end up going. None of this would be possible without the expanded college football playoff format. But because we're getting that expanded format in 2024, I think this is the move that makes more sense, and let the Pac-12 die the death it so justly deserves after all the bungling and mishandling of that conference by its leadership. Leave it in the dirt and rise up the Mountain West. Now, there's also, those are 3 parts of scenario 1. The second possibility that we got to discuss here is Colorado leaves and nobody leaves with them. That is definitely a possibility. Oregon could meet tomorrow. They could be discussing, what kind of hot dogs to sell in the concession stands, or they could discuss this whole situation and decide to stay. Oregon decides to stay. I don't think Washington makes the jump right now. I think it's a very unstable conference. I don't know if they have longevity. I don't expect them to continue to survive. But if Washington and Oregon decide to stay put, now you've got a 9-conference Pac-12. What happens then? 9 teams. There's no stability there. You've already lost a member. Did you lose that much? That's the real question. I mean, Colorado has only 4 seasons where they had a better than a 50% winning percentage in the last 20 years. So you didn't lose much. Yeah, there's a lot of hype right now with Deion Sanders. but that's all it is. It's just hype. There's no solid actual evidence that that Colorado is adding anything to the Pac-12 conference. So all you lose is a number. You're just down to 9 teams. If you add San Diego State, which I think is the move, I think that's almost 100% certain what the Pac-12 chooses to do. They bring in San Diego State. Does San Diego State choose to accept? With all the instability, I mean, that is definitely a question for a future day, but that's the move they make. They move to add San Diego State to get to at least 10 teams. Now, I could see them, Pac-12 is so hard to predict because they are, like I've said, they are the worst run conference in the country. They don't care about actual quality of a football program. All they care about is their ivory towers and the academic success. They're not actually running a football conference. They're running an academic conference, and thus the reason that they are absolutely crumbling apart right now. So, what is the move that makes sense for the Pac-12 if Colorado is the only team to leave? The sensible move is to add San Diego State and then SMU and then either Boise State, Fresno State, or UNLV, one of those 3 teams to get you back to 12 teams. That's what makes sense. I mean, it makes sense to expand beyond that, but that is the minimum that you need to do to regain some stability is get back to 12 teams, add San Diego State, for their market has been discussed. I mean, I've already made a video talking about why I don't think San Diego State is such a great pick. But for all the reasons San Diego State's being promoted, I think they're better than Colorado. I think any team that I've named is better than Colorado. I think UNLV is a better option than Colorado. So, and you know you've known what I thought about UNLV. So I think all these teams make a good option to be picked up. I think San Diego State definitely gets added if Colorado leaves and nobody else does. I think that the smart move is to move on SMU and then add Boise State, Fresno State, or UNLV, one of those 3, and get back to 12 teams. Now, will that happen? I'm not sure. I could definitely see the Pac-12 staying at 10 teams. Will they add San Diego State? Will San Diego State accept? How does this impact their media deal, which is definitely hanging by a thread already? And what will this conference look like in the future? Does it have a future? All those are definitely questions for future videos. But thanks so much for joining me today. Let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comment section below. Make sure you check out my preview of Boise State football for 2023. I've been doing a 3-part series with former football players coming on and talking about the offense and defense so far. I had Grant Hendrick on to discuss the offense, had Winston Venable on to discuss the defense, and I have Joel Velasquez coming on next week to help me preview the special teams. And then also make sure you check out the preview series I did, 10 and 10, which is a little bit of a shorter previews to answering the top 10 questions for Boise State football in 2023, which I did with Ron Counts and Idaho Statesman. So thanks so much for being here today. Thanks so much for being part of this conversation. Yeah, this is something I just whipped out real quick in response to the news because I really wanted to have this discussion. So maybe not as orderly and formatted as I like to have most of my videos, but I had a fun time discussing this, and I want to hear your thoughts. Do you think the Pac-12 is on its last legs? Who's next to go? What happens from here? Does the Mountain West absorb the Pac-12? Does the Pac-12 absorb the Mountain West? Lots of questions to go through, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. So thanks so much for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, and as always, go Big Blue!